The stone path ended at a yawning crevasse in the earth, jagged and wide like the mouth of some long-dead beast. Ancient statues lined the descent, crumbled and moss-choked, their faces smoothed by centuries of wind and rain. Above them, clouds brewed a storm that hadn't quite made up its mind. "I hate when they skip the tavern," muttered Dane Ironstep, gripping the hilt of his axe like it owed him money. The dwarf stood squat and solid, a wall of steel and beard. Behind him, Mira, the elven wizard, peered into the darkness with a faint scowl. Her robe shimmered with protective runes, her fingers twitching with habitual spell work. "I wasn't aware this job came with a complimentary ale," she replied dryly. "But do tell me more about your tragic lack of appetizers." Trailing behind them came Tomlin, a human cleric of Pelor, sunlit armor now dulled by mud and dust. He clutched his mace and holy symbol with the tense reverence of a man preparing to meet something unnatural. His face held the kind of grim kindness usually found on hospice workers and executioners. And lastly, Lisa, the rogue, crept along the flanks. She was lean, leather-clad, and quiet as regret. Where the others made noise, clanking, muttering, sighing, she moved like shadow, eyes scanning for traps, trouble, and loot. They weren't here by chance. 2 days prior, a merchant caravan had limped into Valbrook. One of the wagons had been attacked near the swamplands, a swarm of skeletal figures emerging from the ground itself. Of the travellers, only one man had survived. Bloodied and broken, he had spoken just 6 words before slipping into unconsciousness. They took her into the dark. His daughter, maybe 7 years old, had vanished in the assault. A healer tended the man, but his mind had fractured. Still, he gripped a pendant in his hand, one etched with the mark of the drowned halls. Once a temple, then a tomb, now something worse. "We get in," Dane said, staring at the stone arch ahead. "We find the girl. We get out. No heroics," Lisa added, "unless they're mine." They descended. The interior was colder than expected. The moment they passed the threshold, warmth abandoned them like a bad investment. The stone beneath their boots was slick with moisture. The air tasted like iron and rot. Pillars lined the entrance hall, each carved with faded reliefs of priests or penitents, many of whom were now missing heads. "Charming," Mira muttered. She traced a finger along a glyph etched in the wall. "These symbols are devotional, but distorted, like something copied from memory after a bad dream." "Don't like dreams," Dane said. "Too much imagination. Can't swing an axe at 'em." Further in, the walls narrowed into a corridor, no wider than 2 men, side by side. Lisa took point, kneeling to examine the floor ahead. "Pressure plates," she whispered, "and a tripwire. Someone's been busy." "Someone?" Tomlin asked. Lisa didn't answer. Lisa's fingers moved with precision, snipping the wire with barely a sound. She gestured for the others to wait, then pointed out a patch of worn tiles lined with nearly invisible grooves. "Step wide," she whispered, "unless you want a spear in the thigh." Dine grunted. Had worse from a tavern chair. With care, they passed the trap, feet falling in quiet sync. The passage grew more claustrophobic, walls pressing in, the stone dark and sweating. Somewhere deeper, water dripped in an uneven rhythm, like a heartbeat learning to lie. They passed a collapsed arch where twisted roots had broken through the ceiling. Mold covered most surfaces, and the air grew heavy with the scent of mildew and something faintly burnt. Mira paused to examine a row of cracked bas-reliefs. These figures, they're praying. but not to Pelor or any sun god I recognise. The figures knelt before a spindly, abstract form. No face, just curling limbs and an empty space where its heart should be. Probably just a local flavour of creepy, Dine muttered, pushing on. Soon they reached a chamber that opened like a swallowed breath. The ceiling vaulted high, vanishing into darkness. What remained of a ceremonial dais sat crooked at the far end, the statue atop it half dissolved by time or acid. Pew-like benches were strewn about in rotted rows, as if thrown by a wind from within. And there, at the centre, something moved. Tomlin spotted it first. "There," he said. "Something's hunched behind the altar." The party froze. A faint sound, breathing, laboured, wet. Dine raised his shield. Mira stepped back, hand glowing with quiet power. Lysa circled right, eyes narrowed, blades drawn. Then, a whisper. A voice. "Papa?" The rogue stopped in her tracks. A small shape stirred. A child, no older than 7, crawled out from behind the altar. She was filthy, barefoot, hair tangled in clumps. Her eyes were wide and sunken, rimmed with something not quite natural. "Is that—" Tomlin began. "Don't," Mira warned, her voice sharp. "Something's wrong." The girl stood too smoothly, her head tilted just a little too far. Her mouth opened, but the voice that came out didn't belong in a child's body. "You shouldn't be here." And then, the shriek. It split the air like a blade. From the shadows, figures burst forth. Humanoid, skeletal, twitching with unnatural spasms. Not raised from death, but warped within it. Their eyes glowed the same dim colour as the girl's pendant, still hanging from Mira's neck. Dine stepped forward with a roar, shield raised just in time to absorb the blow of a jagged blade. Sparks flew. Lysa danced through the melee, knives flickering like angry lightning. Tomlin shouted a prayer and unleashed a radiant burst. One of the creatures screamed as its bones cracked under divine fury. Mira drew a glyph in the air and snapped her hand forward. A shockwave of flame erupted, sending one of the creatures careening into a column with a charred hiss. The child, or whatever she was, had vanished, and the shriek still echoed. When the last creature fell twitching to the floor, silence returned like a closing door. Dine panted, bloodied. What in all the gods' names was that? Mira held the pendant in her hand. It was still glowing. "She's close," she said, but that wasn't her. Lysa cleaned her blade. "We're not alone down here." Tomlin, pale, said nothing. He just stared at the altar, where fresh footprints, bare and small, led into the dark beyond. The tracks led deeper. Bare feet pressed into damp stone. Too deliberate, too clean. As they followed, the air grew colder, and the passage narrowed into a winding throat of black stone. No moss, no carvings, just smooth walls that seemed a swept shadow. No one spoke. Even Dane, who usually filled silence with grumbling, held his tongue. Mira's face was pale in the light of her conjured orb. Tomlin clutched his holy symbol tight enough for the edges to bite into his palm. And Lysa had drawn both blades, eyes darting to every corner. The corridor ended in a wide chamber, dome-like and empty, except for the stone platform at its centre. Upon it sat the girl, alive, still, watching. Her voice when she spoke was no longer shrill or monstrous. It was calm, quiet, measured. "I didn't mean to get lost." Tomlin stepped forward, tears welling. "Child, we're here to bring you home." She tilted her head. "I don't think I can leave." Mira's orb dimmed as she whispered, "There's something under this place." The pendant at her neck vibrated, humming now, not glowing. The resonance built in their bones. Beneath the floor, The stone itself groaned like something ancient was waking. The girl blinked. It wanted someone to talk to. Dine lifted his axe. "She's not possessed," he said. "She's anchored." The shadows around the chamber pulsed outward, then in. The floor cracked. From beneath the platform, something rose. A form, vaguely humanoid, limbs too long, a head crowned with root-like tendrils. Its eyes were holes, literal absence, and its mouth opened in a grin that echoed with stolen voices. Mira recoiled. "It used her voice to lure us." Tomlin raised his symbol. "Back thing, in Pelor's name." But the creature hissed, and the girl screamed, not in fear, but with the thing, their voices now layered and fused. Combat was instant. Dawn charged, striking high, blade skimming off the thing's rubbery flesh. It moved like smoke, dodging and twisting, dragging illusions behind it like shreds of thought. Lysa leapt onto the platform, grabbing the girl, who thrashed violently. She tried to speak again, his voice in her mouth, but Lysa slapped a hand over it. Not this time. Mira unleashed a barrage of arcane missiles, which struck the creature and shattered part of its form into flaking black ash. But it reformed, laughing. Tomlin knelt beside the girl and pressed his symbol to her forehead. "Let her go. Now." A blast of radiant light seared across the chamber. The creature shrieked, not in pain, but fury. It lunged, but Dayan tackled it mid-charge, burying his axe in what passed for its chest. The girl collapsed in Lysa's arms. The room shook. The being, whatever it had once been, howled as Mira unleashed a final wave of fire, and Tomlin's light poured into the cracks in the stone. The platform caved in. It fell into the pit below, and was silent. The four stood at the edge, heaving. The girl lay unconscious, her breathing steady now. The hum had stopped. Dine wiped his blade. "Is it dead?" "No," Mira said. "Just buried." Lysa nodded. "Let's keep it that way." They emerged at dawn. The storm had passed. Birds sang again. Valebrook lay ahead, the child safe, a father waiting. "You saved her! You saved my baby!" he cried. The townsfolk erupted into cheers. Mira placed her hand on Dane's shoulder. "Let's go get you that ale." But behind them, deep below, the stones still pulsed, once every few minutes, like a heartbeat trying to remember its rhythm.